Good evening, and thank you for joining us for March 1st Saturday, a movement in every direction. This month's theme honors the pivotal role of women and non-binary people in society, political and aesthetic movements for liberation. My name is Enrique Mendia, and I'm the Public Programs Assistant here at the Brooklyn Museum. I take he, him pronouns. Before we delve into tonight's lineup, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are currently located on land that is part of the unceded ancestral homeland of the Lenape Delaware Nations. We recognize and honor the Lenape Delaware Nations, their elders, and all future generations. At the museum, we are committed toward addressing exclusions and erasures of indigenous peoples in our collective work and confronting ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. First Saturday is our beloved monthly evening of free programming that has been around for 25 years. So this is our 25th anniversary. Yeah, let's hear it. This year, the 25th anniversary season is presented with support by Bank of America. Well, I'm so excited to be here to celebrate Fariha Roisin's book, Who is Wellness For? In Who is Wellness For? Fariha explores the commodification and appropriation of wellness through the lens of social justice, providing resources to help anyone participate in self-care regardless of race, identity, socioeconomic status, or able-bodiedness. Tonight, she will be joined in conversation by Sinikiwe Dilewayo. Fariha Roisin is a multidisciplinary artist born in Ontario, Canada. She was raised in Sydney, Australia, and is based in Los Angeles. As a Muslim queer Bangladeshi, she's interested in margins, in liminality, otherness, and the mercurial nature of being. Her work has pioneered a refreshing and renewed conversation about wellness, contemporary Islam, and queer identities, and has been featured in the New York Times, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, and Vogue. She's the author of the poetry collection, How to Cure a Ghost, as well as the novel, Like a Bird, Who is Wellness For? And her second book of poetry is entitled Survival Takes a Wild Imagination, out fall 2023. Sinikiwe is a former cheerleader turned visual editor turned wellness enthusiast. She has a penchant for smiling, dancing, and bodies of water. Her affinity for visual storytelling stems from a desire to shift the perception of how Blackness and humanity are perceived. Sinikiwe Stephanie is dedicated to the notion that love is a catalyst for lasting change and is unwavering in her commitment to making society more equitable and just. Following the conversation, we'll have an audience Q&A. So if you look to your sides, there will be mics there. I'll be there to support. So ready up your questions for both of our speakers tonight. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome onto the stage Fariha.
Can you hear me? Yes, okay. I gotta put my crystals on the table. Give me a second. Thank you so much for being here. It means a lot. I'm excited to talk and to read. Okay, so I'm going to start with reading the final chapter, which is my favorite chapter because it encompasses everything that I feel like I really need to say in the book. And yeah, it's meaningful for me to share that with you today. So enjoy. On sacred reciprocity. When we love the earth, we are able to love ourselves more fully. Bell Hooks. Recently, I came across the phrase Meden Agen, which was the second maxim inscribed on the forecourt of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. It means nothing in excess. My father used to tell me, and still does when I let him, Baba, everything in moderation. If he had a phrase, this would be it. As a child, when he'd tell me this, I'd only think of restrictions. I thought that a good life was opposite to the one I had, a sheltered, fractured, hostile life, a life of lack. So a good life meant plenty. It meant indulgence. In the last few months, I've considered this in the realms of my own body, learning to stay still with myself. Cultivating that ear has meant that I've had to listen when my body has shut down against alcohol, dairy, and sugar, things I feel I am programmed to give it through commercials and capitalism, because a good life, to me, meant excess. When I want to indulge, rarely do I think of something that will make me feel good, but rather, I'll crave the prescribed idea of that thing. This is why American advertising is so insidious. It relies on selling you the life it wants you to want. For me, my want for things came from a place of lack. I felt as if I had nothing, and I desperately wanted something. Remember that feast scene in A Little Princess? I felt I was always her, trying to make something out of emptiness. But though I was makeshifting a life of joy, a family, a feast, a good life, it was one that Hollywood sold to me, not what was mine, not what was in my heart, not my own dreams. Dreaming is extremely important for the revolution. Believing in possibility, what can come and what should come, requires all of us to dream for the future, for more. Brazilian architect and urbanist Paulo Tavares writes in the essay The Political Nature of the Forest, a botanic archaeology of genocide, that the Amazon was always seen as a void space characterized by chronic lack, that it only represented demographic emptiness, technological underdevelopment, economic stagnation, territorial isolation. Within this construct of the colonial imagination, there wasn't an understanding that a relationship to the land, to each other, had value. There was no humility and understanding that another way of life could have wisdom for the colonizer. It reminds me of what Vandana Shiva spoke to about the forests of India, of my grandparents' homeland. When they looked at the forests of Bengal, all the colonizers saw and believed was, again, lack. They built an entire ethos on lack, and hundreds of years of European philosophy shows the disregard of human life and how that is metabolized in the consciousness of whoever was struck by colonial thought. So, basically everyone. White men want to barrage everyone with their existentialism, but maybe the bleakness of their souls lies in the incapacity to appreciate this earth, this bounty. They don't see how she deserves their protection. God is here. We just have to open our hearts to each other. Indigenous peoples of the world have lived sustainably in accordance with the land because among a plethora of land wisdom, they have always understood the nature of sacred reciprocity. When an ayahuasca teacher first introduced me to this concept, I felt a ripple of bright recognition run through me like a gentle wave. Sacred reciprocity is a concept that relies on an understanding that there is something inherently spiritual in your exchange with others, with the planet, with the trees, the birds, the spectacular wildlife of this lush and verdant planet. Do you ever get high and watch nature documentaries? You know how you can feel the rupture of the planet's pull next to the grandiosity of a peacock's mating dance, or the hum of the ocean's wind as a dolphin pirouettes from water into the sky? This earth, this big, great earth, with her mountainous, icy peaks, her limestone edges and creeks that glimmer with pearly moss. Every part of this planet has a secret waiting to unravel. Instead of spending billions of dollars on endless military, mindlessly expanding an empire for no cause, what if that money was invested back into the land, into protecting and defending her? We must reclaim indigenous intellectual traditions of the Western Hemisphere, which have some of the most advanced technology in human history. We have to understand that the earth has logic and magic that we don't understand, but through cultivating and reinvesting in her, by cultivating and reinvesting in ourselves, we create new paradigms of being. We have to understand the symbiosis between species, that there is a deep wisdom in how a butterfly breaks through its cocoon and how a bee collects pollen. These systems are interdependent, so we must move with them, with the land. Maintain diverse languages, cultures, and systems that reflect the ecosystems of the shifting landscapes you inhabit over time. Tyson Yunkaporta guides us with his yarn, his deep indigenous knowledge and research. There is an undeniable pattern in the sum total of all these old stories from around the world, indicating that sedentary lifestyles and cultures that do not move with the land or mimic land-based networks in their social systems do not transition well through apocalyptic moments. The more we work against the land, the harder it will be for us. It's important to understand that ecological dependency is paramount. According to Tavares, ecocide and genocide are closely linked, often a mirror of one another in the fight for land sovereignty. Understanding other ecologies we share on this earth, understanding that it's important that we start thinking with these other species in mind are the steps that need to be taken by all of us. Learning we are connected to the earth and everything she embodies means we take better care of it all. Understanding that we have a responsibility for not only our own survival, but hers and theirs. It's a mutual responsibility to plants, to animals, to water, vast and sublime. Sacred reciprocity is an ethos we must embody towards everything we share this planet with. To echo Jane Goodall, humans are the only ruinous species on the planet. Is this all our intelligence has amounted to? Scarcity is linked to capitalism because we need to feel scarce in order to want more. It's a deflection device created to convince us of our immortality. But when we die, we will be put back into this earth. Isn't it beautiful that we can honor what will hold us in the afterlife? There's a sacred reciprocity in that as well. Kimmerer, Robin Wall Kimmerer, believes what we really want is to be valued, earning the regard of your neighbors for the quality of your character, not the quantity of your possessions, what you give, not what you have. Looking at my own life, my own deep cravings, I would agree. It's about reorienting the family unit and understanding again that we're all that we have. The connections in this lifetime are what mature us, teach us, sustain us, and when we are in sacred reciprocity with each other, honoring each other's pasts, experiences, and needs, we can better help facilitate true healing for humanity and the planet. If I cry, it's okay. Just warning everyone. I can feel it. I know my relationship to my mother is difficult, yet it is also a portal. It's a wound that's become bigger than me, and it's given me a mission to make art to heal. Forgiveness is an important component here. for my body and for hers. Understanding that this was my path and that was hers has helped me lift the trauma, helped me lift the load that trauma weighs. The exceptionalism and devastating traumatic events creates a narrative of victimization that I needed to pull myself out of. All these years through this journey, I've asked, what's standing in my way of forgiveness? On a societal level, it's important to ask the same question. What is standing in the way of our liberation? To love ourselves and others. Sacred reciprocity is tied to accountability of yourself because you have a moral code to yourself. When you take only as much as you give, it gets easier to see those who do the same. If we could trust one another, then maybe we'd consider setting a higher standard for ourselves. It's no surprise that a society that refuses to take accountability perpetuates a people who do the same. The system that we have is so based in, you're a bad person, so bad things deserve to happen to you, Mingus tells us, rather than we are all human, and human beings make mistakes, and we are all flawed, and we are all living in incredibly violent conditions. Abolition and transformative justice are acutely linked to the land, but that imprint needs to happen among us humans more. We need to take ourselves as custodians of this earth more seriously and understand how grave the circumstances are. Evolutionary biologist David Sloan Wilson has found that competition makes sense only when it's about the individual. However, when it comes to a group, cooperation is a better model, not only for surviving, but for thriving. There is symbiosis at every single level of living things, Richard Powers writes, and you cannot compete in a zero-sum game with creatures upon whom your existence depends. For the skeptical, Kimmerer responds, you might rightly observe that we no longer live in small, insular societies where generosity and mutual esteem structure our relations, but we could. It is within our power to develop an interconnectedness outside the market economy. Intentional communities of mutual self-reliance and reciprocity are the wave of the future, and their currency is sharing. There is vast potential here, and that's what we should remember. There's excitement here, newness, but above all, there's accessibility for all, not accessibility for a select few at the expense of most others. Creating local food economies by investing in community gardens or local farms, especially indigenous or Black-owned ones, instead of expending energy and resources on trade is one way of the future. Creating stronger mutual aid networks that protect everyone, divesting from capitalism by degrowing and redistributing wealth are ways towards our collective future. For cases where imported goods can't be substituted, we can minimize trade with the West and opt instead to trade with the global South. This is what Egyptian economist Samir Amin calls delinking from unequal exchange. In 1978, Japanese farmer Masanobu Fukuoka advocated for a do-nothing type farming, calling for curiosity, openness, and a willingness to fail so that we can learn to trust ourselves, but more the cycles of the earth. His farming practices created no pollution and didn't use fossil fuels. There are ways we haven't tried yet, ways to be in accordance with every facet of the earth. This means taking responsibility for your usage, but also your own actions. Intentionality now needs to be sourced from deep within. I want to live in accordance with sacred reciprocity, to exist there in that heart-centeredness. It's wild that people, society, want to convince you out of the power of your heart, of the will it takes to listen, but the hunger that is satiated when you move with integrity, that there's nothing quite like it. By using sacred medicines like marijuana, mushrooms, and grandmother ayahuasca, I have found deep healing and understand that plants are a gateway to the divine. I honor these medicines and the traditional custodians that brought us this knowledge, the wisdom keepers who did nothing for profit, but only for the love of the earth. Something changed in me when I began to let myself absorb the spirit of this great planet. It happened soon after I sat with grandmother ayahuasca for the first time. Completely unbridled, she cracked me open, reminding me that to be porous, to be vulnerable, is the most generous thing you can offer. It's fascinating how having gratitude for this life, whatever this life has brought you, brings profundity to what surrounds us. Ojibwe elder and activist Winona LaDuke says that Indigenous practice is about recovering that which the Creator gave us as instructions and then walking that path. To me, there's nothing more honorable than that, to find a devotion so deep toward God that gratitude is all that remains. We are here. We are here together, and that matters. I don't need to convince anyone of anything, and yet this beautiful, tragic life I've been given has brought such awakening. My entire life, I have resented and resisted what stood before me and behind me like a wide, nauseating ache. I have felt so at the behest of my life, but that changed when I started praying. When I committed to prayer every day, not on a gynemas as I was taught, but something more informal between God and me, something like a spell lifted. I never had to abandon God, and we never had to abandon this planet. I have lived many years in pain, but I have a new drive to move through these machinations of being. There is a sacredness here. There always was. It's about seeing it with fresh eyes and remembering everything can be a teaching. It is the same for the woman in exile. If she is an ugly duckling, if she is unmothered, her instincts have not been sharpened. She learns instead by trial and error, usually many trials, many, many errors, but there is hope, for you see, the exile never gives up. She keeps going till she finds the guide, the scent, till she finds the trail, till she finds home. Estes writes, with a necessity in women who run with the wolves. Finally, I am finding home in myself by being true, honest. Wanting to align with integrity in myself meant accepting the totality of my being, the hurt and the joy, the sacredness and the profane. I was going to choose to be bold in myself, in my own intuitive understanding of self. I see how revolutionary this act is. To love yourself when others have loved you so poorly is a reminder that anything can be shifted into something meaningful. Sometimes it's about interpretation, remembering sacred reciprocity and moving within that framework. Understanding it's not my job to serve anybody has shown me care could mean mutuality. By determining my own needs, I am finding home on this earth by declaring myself worthy of a good life, but not at the expense of another's. I hope to protect every human life, every human on this planet, even the ones I dislike, because I cherish human life. I cherish our time here together on this mortal plane. And with that reminder, I look towards something bigger than my own needs. It's learning how to contain multitudes, to hold many things at once, is a generous act that we owe to each other. Forgiveness and generosity. More of us have to move with that understanding because there's something vast at stake here, and thus worth fighting for. When I found worthiness in myself and protecting myself, it got easier to think about protecting the earth. Wellness for all is a worthy pursuit. It means true planetary healing. We have to believe it's possible. These days, I look to the trees, my ancestors. I feel their pulse in my skin, in my heart, in the beat of my breath as I walk past the reservoir near my home. When I was a teenager, my mother's house also had a reservoir just behind the bush, and I would go there when I was hurt to nurse my wounds with water and moss. This earth has always given me recovery. My tears connected me to her rivers, to the creeks that gushed with pebbles, oceans that generated such stillness and ferocity. I found such a holy sanctuary there, in the pockets of nature's grasp. I always assumed I didn't have a mother, but now I look back and I realize my mother was this earth. And in moments of tenderness, loneliness, and even awe, she is always there to hold me, to tend to me, to brace me with her grounding. I owe everything to this earth for my survival. The trees are my kin. They listen to me weep. They hear my gratitude as I pray to their roots for patience and grace, all the wisdom that they have taught me. I find great mercy with them, with the eucalyptus and the lilac and the Meyer lemon trees that surround me. They root me through my unrootedness so much that all I can say is thank you. My gratitude for this earth is endless. What a privilege it is to be with her in this lifetime and to have her guidance and care. It's so humbling to be alive, and I will never, ever stop saying thank you for my life, for everything. Thank you. Yay. Okay, well, now we're going to be in conversation, and maybe I'll cry more.
Hi, y'all. Thanks for joining us. I was holding back tears over there. It was just so powerful, and I love that you thank the earth. I wish that more people had reverence for the earth. I think we wouldn't be in the predicament that we were in if that were the case.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I want to start by talking about how you define wellness and what that means for you. Gotta get cozy. It's important.
I'm cold. What does wellness mean for me?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? I'm going to turn to you more. A lot of people ask me that, and I never have like one answer. I think wellness means, in the most simple sense, to be well. And then if I was to expand and extrapolate on that, I think wellness is a movement for all. It should be a movement for all, and it's not. And that's why I wrote this book, because I have a contentious relationship to wellness, and I'm also, and I think you are too, a person who deeply needs wellness. I have a body that has experienced a lot of harm. Is the microphone okay? Okay. I have a body that experienced a lot of harm. For those of you who are not familiar with my work, I'm a child sexual abuse survivor, and I was sexually abused by a parent, which I write about in the book. And I think contending with that has many layers, and whilst writing the book, it really became an examination of both myself and the larger wellness industry. And, I'm someone who needs to be well. I would literally die if I didn't dedicate my life to all of the practices that I've sort of created for myself in order to not be sick. So, I don't know, I have a lot of feelings about wellness and what it means to me. But that's sort of the beginning.
I think that's a great start, but I'm also curious about how we as human beings begin to acknowledge the work of being well, and that work goes beyond kind of the surface of what we buy or what we consume. Thinking of Instagram captions and hashtag self-care, right? But the work of actually being well is really messy. And you speak in your book about the process of healing occurring for you in like these little deaths. And I'm curious when that first death happened for you to begin your journey to being well.
I mean, the first death happened as a child. I think that I had to accept as an adult that my body was never mine. And so at a certain point, I started rejecting myself, and that created immense disease in my body. I was always sick. I always had asthma. I was not a healed child. I didn't have a childhood, really. And so I really feel like I died from the beginning, and that I think that's why I have like such an intense relationship to death, because I keep dying all the time. Writing this book, I was dying all the time. When I write the IBS chapter, because I have IBS, and I have really bad IBS. I've had it since I was 14, which was a sign. I never, like, things that, when you're sick, you don't understand why. And then as an adult, if you have the privilege of being able to kind of pay attention to yourself, or if for me, it was my sister was a gateway to wellness, because she doesn't have the same language as I do around her trauma, but we were both highly traumatized, and we were living in a very abusive household, and I think that she needed to really find a way, she's 7 years older than me, really find a way back in Australia in the 90s, like learn how can I not collapse. And so she was sort of my first gateway, and she's taught me so much. But the process of healing, I think, really is an anticipation of death. It's also an understanding of your own mortality. It's an understanding of how, limited our time is here, and how important it is to prioritize your own health, especially as Black and brown people. We don't really have a choice. I don't think I have a choice to not consider my life, and therefore I have to consider death.
If we're considering our lives as individuals, though, how do we, in a real way, consider the lives of others in community? Because when you I think of the wellness industry at large, right? Selling us things, making us buy things, et cetera. But then I think of our individual endeavors to be well. And so often those things bump against each other, right? Because capitalism wants us to consume. And then our individual healing is normally just very personal. And so how do we engage in community in those endeavors so hopefully, eventually, we reach liberation? That's the goal.
I don't think that you can be individually well, by the way. It's impossible. You can't. you're going to go out into the street and someone's going to say something to you and you're going to be like, what? Like, it's not, you're not, or like you're going to see, houselessness, or you're going to see something that triggers you, or you're going to be in an experience where someone triggers you. And we're so interwoven in community and society, and we deny, because of capitalism, we deny that reality because we have been sold, especially in America, that you are the most important thing. And that's not true. You can't actually be a person if you are not more engaged. And I think that falsity is something that we're really reckoning with at a mass level. And it's really exciting. It's revolutionary. It's revolutionary times. I feel it. I really do. But we have to kind of get out of this headspace of you as an individual is the most important thing. And of course, like, that's not to say that if you have, like, I don't have a relationship with my mother anymore. I contend with that in the book. That's why, the last chapter, I'm thinking about forgiveness. I understand that I'm a contradiction. We all are. I can understand that forgiveness is very important, and I can also have boundaries about what feels good for me. So this is not to say that you got to be happy and chill and be in community with people that you don't like. But I think that we have to think more beyond the scope of America and capitalism and move beyond the borders of like how much is at stake and how much has been stolen for the American dream and for this upward scale of that capitalistic, growth. Like we can have it all at whose expense? Like, we have to consider what's the total cost here if you can have it all.
So what in practice, what does community care look like?
I think that is something that we all have to figure out on our own. I mean, for me, it's meant, really restoring my relationship with community, and also like taking accountability for my own actions, or trying to engage more fairly and not always putting myself in the center of every narrative. Because you're not always the center of every narrative. And the world doesn't revolve around you. And it's actually incredibly humbling to do that work. And I do a lot of death work. And I think like sitting with medicines, or, I want to be a death doula, and that's something that I'm, conceptualizing in my own life right now. And I think the moment you think about death, your life changes and it shifts, and you understand sort of the expansion of community and how profound it is to share your life with other people. But, for me, it's been really simple, too. It's like going to Qigong every Saturday and being with my community there, or like, really, I'm part of Degrowth, New York, and I think there are people here from Degrowth, and that makes me really happy to be involved in like community in that way, and to understand that mutual aid or community gardens, like composting, things like that, you're, returning back into the earth and like having a relationship with the earth and doing things that help you do that, you find ways to community. But it's all sort of an individual journey to that point. Like, I think that there are many ways that one can be more invested, but it's about really listening to yourself and tending to what feels good for you personally, and how you can show up in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I want to talk about rage a little bit.
Ooh.
Yeah, because I think as I'll speak from the I, as a Black woman, my experience of rage is that I'm not allowed to be angry, even when really fucked up shit happens. Pardon my swearing. And so I am curious about how you began to access your rage of all the terrible things that happened to you, right? And what you learned from that rage and how you wield it in a manner that is not destructive.
I didn't know how to access my rage until like 3 years ago. I started trauma therapy, and my therapist was like, so talk to me about anger. And I was like, I have no anger. It's amazing. Like, I'm cured. And I honestly thought it was a really good thing. I was like, oh, no. Rage is, I don't have that. I don't know her. And I really was in so much denial. And my therapist was like, that's not true, girl. And I was like, it is. And she kept sort of like trying to like understand it. And I believed I didn't have rage because my mother was so angry as a person, and it was ugly to me. And, you know, she's the type of person that in public she would just scream at me, or she would scream at us. And she was someone who didn't have any boundaries, and especially with herself. And she was always leaking out. And it felt so disruptive to me psychologically and for my nervous system. And so I never wanted to be in imposition. And so I kind of put myself into a little box and was like, okay, I'm gonna be perfect. And of course, in my mind, I was like, well, if I'm perfect, I don't have any anger. I've released it, or I've, sublimated it. I really thought that I was sublimating my rage for a very long time. And then through therapy, I've started to locate my rage. And something that's been really interesting too is like, because I have a lot of chronic illness and chronic issues with my body, I started to understand, even through just like acupuncture or like TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, or even Ayurveda, that all have explanations for this. If you don't channel your anger, so if you don't let it out, essentially, and find a way that's healthy for you to let it out, it's gonna go back into your body. And so for me, it was going back into my body. It was like creating this like excess fire, essentially. And I would have eczema. Like I had eczema for a really long time. And eczema is fire. It's an excess of fire. So all of these things, like your body has language that it's communicating with you, and it's communicating to you about these things. But if you're kind of like in this world, that I had created for myself of like really seeking perfectionism, I was denying my own truth, my own reality, and also my own body. And these days, I don't like to be an angry person in terms of how I am with other people. So I think I still kind of don't express that, not because I don't want to, but I don't, I let it out, and to have like safe relationships that like allow you to erupt is very important. But I really have, I think, this book is very angry. It's very angry. It's like the first 2 sections are extremely angry. And I know people that like stopped reading and they're like, this is a little too much for me. But the second 2, like the last 2 parts are really transformative and I think quite healing. And it sort of mirrors my own journey of like being really angry that I wasn't letting my anger out, or like that I had denied my own reality for so long. And then I channeled that anger into justice. And I think that's what has changed for me. Like, not just sublimating unconsciously and being like, oh no, like, I'm not angry, but actually acknowledging the anger and then using it as a tool for something else, like revolution, like liberation, has been so healing for me. And that is how I show my rage. Like, I will fight anyone if I have to.
Amen.
Scorpio. I know. I got a Mars in Sagittarius, and that's why I'm not. Yeah, did someone say whoa? Okay, great. And so I'm not about the fighting life, but if I need to,
if you gotta fight,
I got some, and I think we all have to learn how to do that, and also it's about protecting yourself as a person, protecting your life, protecting your. Natalie Diaz has this, Navajo poet Natalie Diaz has this incredible quote, which is, "Trust your anger, it's a demand for love." Yeah. And I think about that a lot. I've been thinking about that quote a lot recently because I think that there's an important and a deep importance and necessity to listening to anger, but I think we're a society that's on a pendulum swing. We're either not angry at all or we're immensely angry at the wrong things. And we should be channeling that anger towards the American government. I won't go. I'm like, we gotta fight. This is not good. Yeah.
I would also offer, though, I think existing in Black and brown bodies, right?
Yeah.
We don't have a fucking choice.
Yeah.
Right? If we don't fight, who's gonna fight?
Yeah,
no one's
exactly.
fighting for us, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's part of what we have to reckon with.
Totally, yeah. And encourage other people to fight for us as well, especially white-bodied folks, the responsibility and not being overwhelmed by that accountability, but actually using it as a tool and understanding that there's a long fight for the fight for liberation, and that should encourage us and excite us instead of drowning us in fear.
I want to talk a little bit about your mom, if that's okay. So your mom has a lot of mental illness, which you talk about in the book, and she also, by way of having her mental illness, inflicted a lot of trauma on you. So I am curious, how do you really reconcile having a mental illness and having a child? Do you think that there was a way for your mom to tend to her mental illness and not inflict harm on you and your sister?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My mom has borderline personality disorder, and she's bipolar, and I think these DSM and all the explanations are kind of tricky, and they meld into one another, and they're incredibly violent as well, obviously, for anyone who does suffer from these things. It's not easy. I don't know, I have been on the receiving end of so much violence from someone who's so ill. And I wish she didn't have children. And I've had to process that a lot in my life. But, I'm here.
We're glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm alive. Thank you. Yeah, there was a long time in my life that I didn't want to be alive, so it was harder. But now I'm very happy that I'm here because I think I found a voice. I don't know. I think that all I can say is be responsible. Be responsible to your child. I think that there could have been a way for my mom to not be so harmful, but she refused her medication and she refused to change. She still does. And so if you can't take accountability, you can't be better. You just can't. And that's why I don't talk to her, because she doesn't take accountability for her life. And therefore, she doesn't take accountability for her actions, and therefore, she doesn't take accountability for me. And so all of it's connected. But I think that, like, people deserve love. And if you want a child and you want to give that child love and you have the ability to do that, that's an exceptionally beautiful thing. But I actually don't think many of us are equipped to be parents.
That's true.
Yeah, so that's why we're in this mess, you know? Mm-hmm. Boomers, fuck y'all. Jesus Christ.
Very real. I guess I'm also curious about, you talk in the book about making attempts to kind of seek help. And the one that really struck me was like you went to your supervisor, I think it was, when you were working in retail, and you told her that you had just had an abortion, and her response was not so kind, right? Because I guess she was trying to also get pregnant in that moment. And throughout the book, you just talk about these moments of wanting help and kind of seeking people out and being rejected from these attempts to get help. I guess, where did you continue to seek help outside of yourself, or did you look to yourself for that help?
When that happened, I was 19, and it cut me off. Like, that was the last moment, because I also, like, went to my school counselor when I was, like, 14, I think, or maybe younger. I can't actually remember. I think around 14, and I write about this as well, and then my dad was brought into school, and I was like, I'm being abused, and I really wanted to get child services involved. And my dad came, and when he was asked if these things were happening, he was so uncomfortable. And then I was so uncomfortable that I not denied it, but I was like, it's okay. And nothing ever happened. And then I think that there was just like a lot of examples in my life where, like, maybe it's because I'm a Capricorn, I don't know, but people just think that I'm good all the time, you know, and that's something that I've had to really process. It's true, Capricorn, sad girl. But it's true. Nobody thinks that I go through anything, and I think that that's like when I was, 19 and going to I worked at David Jones in Australia, a department store, and I worked at the menswear department, and my manager was, this white woman who was trying to get pregnant, and when I told her that I had just had an abortion because I was looking for, honestly, a mother figure, and like, I've now taken responsibility for like my own ways of like being so hungry for love and just so hungry to get support and help and just being rejected a lot of the time. And her response was like, me and Steve are trying to get pregnant and you just killed your baby. And it was just, it was like being slapped multiple times in the face, and I was just like, okay. And you carry that with you. I think it silenced me. I changed after that. I sort of stopped trying to get help. I stopped trying to get support. And then I became very violent towards myself, and I really sort of put that like anger into myself and just felt as if I was useless, that nobody would ever love me and that nobody would ever give me the kind of dignity that other people get. And I was incredibly lonely, but I got out of it, so that's good.
I know you mentioned you don't speak to your mother, but have you been able to kind of negotiate your father's role in everything? And do you have any type of relationship with him?
Yeah, I love my dad. I have a very good relationship with my dad. But also, like, when I first started therapy, my therapist was like, where was your dad this entire time? And that just threw me off. Like, I wanted to blame my mom, and, that it's easy to sort of be like, this person did everything. And I think my narrative for a very long time was my mother fucked up my life. But you know, yeah, both of them failed as parents. And that's really hard. And I think in trauma, especially if you're being traumatized or you're being violated or you're experiencing violence from one parent, it's very easy to then put all of your needs and sort of like glorify the other parent, because psychologically you have to, otherwise you won't survive. And so I had to kind of make my dad sort of this perfect being. And in a lot of ways, he is a really, really great person, and I, have a great relationship, but he's a weak man, and he did not protect me. And I say that to his face, and he listens, and he really tries to hear me out. And, I think it's hard because, we've all been immensely affected by, like, my mother was just a very violent person. And so even though I experienced sexual abuse from her, we all experienced, like, extreme violence. Like, she tried to burn the house down when I was 13. It was just, like, constant. And he always thought he was doing the best that he could. And I think that you can't really challenge someone who's saying, I'm sorry, I couldn't do much more. And I understand now that he was also, like, I think that my relationship with my father is that he's more a brother than he is a father. And that's tricky, like, parental roles are very important. And you as a child, or you as a person that grows up, when you have that kind of relationship with your parent, it gets very hard to not, if you have to do everything on your own, it's so lonely. But I think we're in the process of rectifying, or like trying to rebuild something that we didn't have. But he's still very much my brother, not my father.
How did you make your body your own again after experiencing all of the physical violence?
Yeah. There's a before and after ayahuasca. Not to be that bitch, but yeah.
But wait, like the puking and the other thing that happens at the same time, like, I just can't bring myself to get over that part.
But it's gonna change your life. It really is. Like, I feel embarrassed by how corny I am, but it's true. It's like there's it's before and after. And I say that because after I started sitting with plant medicines, you're reoriented, just immediately reoriented. And all of the bullshit of the sort of surrounding escapades, or the sort of, matrix, as one might call it, the life that we've been designed to believe is true, that kind of falls away, and you start to see things really clearly. And as a medicine, she's so powerful because she takes you everywhere. She travels with you, and then she goes, that. And you're forced to kind of be like, ugh. And it's really extraordinary. I love the ability to use a torch to see myself. And I think the more it was also like understanding that I was sexually abused, because it happened with my mother. I think I denied, and it was easier to think that it wasn't, even though it happened for years, because we all create narratives to stay alive. And I had to believe that I was normal, that I wasn't a disgusting, violated thing, that I thought that was the only other option I could be. I couldn't be broken and worthy of love. I had to be, perfect, or I had to be clean. I had to be untouched. And accepting that in all of my brokenness, that I was whole, like finding wholeness in myself, and like accepting the kind of shape and the like puzzles. It really is like kind of putting a puzzle together when you start to like use the torch of like medicines or therapy or whatever is your torch. You begin to create a map of who you are. And when I started to create that map, and I really distinctly remember like telling my therapist, like, I want to be better, I want to be better. And she's like, what if you just wanted to be whole? And in the wholeness, your rage is allowed, your brokenness is allowed. All of the parts of you that you've discarded and been taught to say, that's not good, I'm going to put that to the side. When I started to accept all of those things, my body started to get clearer. And I started to see the shape of myself more. And it's been astounding to know that it's possible. I never had a role model in that sense. And I get to be my own role model, and I get to hopefully guide people back to themselves. And Who Is Wellness For is a deep desire to, everything that I've ever written, by the way, is a roadmap back to yourself. How to Cure a Ghost, Like a Bird, it's all about uncovering and moving through trauma, because I don't think that you can move out of it. You have to move through it. You have to look at it. You have to actually identify and acknowledge the things that you are and the things that have happened to you in order to move forward. And yeah, nobody ever told me that before. And so that process has helped me understand that I am a body, and I'm a body worth fighting for, and I'm a body worth protecting.
You are. I want to just zoom out a little bit and talk about the language of wellness versus actually being able to access it. So if you go on, TikTok, I feel like everyone on TikTok is self-diagnosing or talking about ADHD or being neurodivergent. And it's, there's a difference between knowing about these things, right, and knowing you might have ADHD or knowing you might be neurodivergent. But then it's very different to actually have the tools to do something about those things, or even accessing therapy. I think people throw that around a lot as like, go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy. Okay, cool, but like, I have had the opportunity to go to a white therapist, and that was really terrible for me, right? And then trying to find a therapist that was culturally competent was like another whole 6 months. You know what I mean? So even that ability to access the things that you need when you need them is really challenging. And I think I'm curious how you kind of contend with those two things.
That's a great question. I think, yeah. Because of TikTok, I think we live and social media, we live in a time where we feel like we have a lot of self-knowledge. I think that what's extremely dangerous, and something that I've seen a lot in wellness spaces, is that people have the right language, but they're not applying any of what they're learning onto themselves. And you, as a self, have to be the litmus test for wellness. If you believe that you are doing this work, instead of lecturing other people about it, you have to come and identify yourself. And I understand that, this journey has been really long for me, and also, I see my sister, who's been doing it even longer than I have, and the ways in which she's denied her own truths or her own accountability or whatever. And I can see sort of my sister won't go to therapy. And it's a huge point of contention for us. And I think she probably feels, similar to you to a certain degree of like, what is this person even going to show me, and teach me that I don't even know myself? And I can't tell you what you got to do for you. You have to figure that out for yourself. And that is actually beautiful. To have agency is really empowering. And I guess that's what I want to remind people, like, to be well is not to be cured. It's not to all of a sudden be like, like you don't have any disease or whatever. I think that's really ableist. And we do live in a very ableist world that like thinks that that's what wellness is. Like, I'm free. When in fact, I think like people's actions and the way that people are with other people, the way that people fight, that's when you see who's well. And for us to all kind of do the work on ourselves, I know like also like doing the work, it's like, what is doing the work? But I'm nervous and afraid that all of us are gonna have all the right language, and that's the only thing that we think is important, like how to be in conversation with other people about wellness, not actually like how do you be or even attempt to be well in yourself. That should be the most important part of this journey if you want to be on a healing journey with yourself. Yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah.
It does, yeah, but I think it goes back to how we started, right? Like, that's the messy part.
Yeah,
like, that's
exactly.
the part you don't want to put on the gram. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I don't know. And I don't know that there are enough people that are willing to really do that messy part. Like, it's very easy to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's not as easy to actually be engaged in that work.
No.
A couple more questions, and then we'll go to the audience. I want to know that you write in the chapter in the book about your ability to love women and femmes and be in those relationships, even though your deepest hurt came from a woman. And so I'm curious about how that conflict has shown up in your romantic relationships, your platonic relationships with women. Like, how has that come up for you? And has it gotten better over time?
Yeah, it has. I love women. Woo! I love women! I do. I really love women. I love women. I could, yeah.
We got you.
Yeah, you get it. You get it. And I had to heal so many of my wounds that I had, not only like the ones that were inflicted onto me, but the misogynistic, that's not a word, but like the patriarchal, misogynist sensibilities that I was taught by my mom, who hates women. And, and a lot of that is cultural for her. She was raised in Bangladesh at a time that, she survived, both of my parents survived a civil war, a liberatory civil war. It was, and 3 million people were reported to have been murdered in 1971 by the Pakistani army. And this isn't something that really a lot of people talk about. They definitely don't talk about it in Bangladesh. And 400,000 women were genocidally raped. And it's the largest known experience of that recorded in human history. And I think that if you experience that, and she survived that, she was I won't get into my mother's history, but when you are living in a culture where women are en masse being treated and violated with such disregard and such violence that you cannot even comprehend anything beyond the fact that you are worthless. And that's what she taught me. She taught me that I was lesser than a man and that I had to be subjugated. And to unlearn that has been revolutionary, but the way that I've unlearned it is through my queerness, is through understanding that in order to love women, I have to respect them, and I have to understand these seeds inside of me that tell me not to trust other women, or not to like other women, or not to believe other women. I've had to learn how to believe other women because I have to believe myself. I have to believe what my own story is, and what my own life is telling me, and what my own body is telling me. And that's when you start to, I think, show up. Because it has to start here. You have to be engaged with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. And I just don't think a lot of us have the tools to do that. And I think self-love is so revolutionary. And that's what Audre Lorde was talking about 30 years, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, in the 70s. What is time?
What is time?
That self-care is revolutionary, especially for people who have never been taught that. And so many of us, I think, have never been given the foundation of self-love, and therefore the love that we need to love each other, and the love that we need to love other women. And we live in a deeply patriarchal society that tells us every day that we are not good enough, whether it's through commercials or through magazines. And I guess you see this less and less, but a lot of us maybe grew up in a time where, every magazine was like, how to lose weight. And it's like, okay, like, why is it always this idea of like, women need to change to be better? They're the ones that need to shift when we live in, deeply patriarchal times, and we have for a millennia, that really pits us against each other, so we don't focus on men, and we don't focus on capitalism, we don't focus on patriarchy. And I think when I started to understand that was the click, like, oh, I'm being forced to denigrate other women, or to see what other women are doing, to be jealous of other women, to envy other women, just so I don't fight back, just so my life never amounts to anything anymore, because I'm so focused on bringing another woman down. And it also is like being a public person, experiencing a lot of, shitty behavior from other people because of X, Y, and Z, knowing that I've experienced a lot of jealousy and a lot of envy thrown at me, has helped me understand and have compassion for the fact that a lot of us don't even know what it means to respect ourselves. So how can we respect other people? How can we feel good about other people's actions or other people's successes if we don't even recognize or validate ourselves? And that's why it really does start with yourself. You have to validate yourself, and it's a journey for me. But in order to do that work, that action is then twofold, because if you're doing it for yourself, immediately it gets easier to do it for other people. And then you're happy instead of being like, why the fuck did I not get that? Or why is that not my life? And I want to live in a world where women protect other women, where we uplift other women, where we love other women openly, and that we can live in a society that is fair to all. That isn't a huge jump for me. I've done it in myself, and I know it's possible. And it's just a matter, I think, of understanding that we have all the tools that we need right now to change.
Thank you. We're going to open it up to audience questions. There's a mic to the left of the stage and to the right of the stage if y'all want to come up and ask some questions.
So we're almost out of time, but we have time for 2 questions. We can take a question on each side. Feel free to come and queue up here, or if you raise your hand, I can bring a mic to you.
There's one right here in the front.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for this. My question is, writing this book, coming on this journey in the backdrop of a global pandemic that we're still in. I'm sort of curious because the title sort of implies, I thought we were all going to learn our connection to one another and we were going to have some accountability. So who is this book for? Because I think most people in this audience will agree with you, will mirror you. We all share these values, but I want to know who you're talking to, and do you think you're going to reach those people with this body of work? That's kind of my question.
Okay. Let me. Can you ask it again? Sorry. Like, who's this book for, essentially? Yeah?
Yeah. And do you think those people, the ones who you're inviting to basically be accountable, do you think they're going to pick this up and come to this and want to explore this?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I hope so. I think that one of the really beautiful experiences of writing this book and then touring this book has been seeing that people are engaged and, like, white folks are engaged. That's where I'm like, whoa, okay, this is good. But I also think that even if a lot of us have the language, we haven't actually applied that work to ourselves. And I think that this book is for everyone. It really is. I'm not writing it for anyone specifically. It's an educational tool for anyone who might be curious. And I think that also seeing healing and seeing the impacts of our unhealing, even just like what I was saying about women liking, caring for other women. We don't do that. Like, we're not, I don't know you, but like, I think that as a society, we don't do that. And so if anyone can read this book and take what I am saying and apply it to their lives, that's amazing. And I think also, like, this book is for child sexual abuse survivors, if it's for anyone. And I have so much respect for people who are healing that. And so that's who I want to read the book. If any survivor reads this book, that's my heart work. But yeah, it's open to all, and I hope that everyone reads it, everyone on this planet. And, I hope folks, I really want to get it into prisons. I really want, it to be an educational tool for anyone, because I hope that if you read this book, then you can have the bare bones and the foundation to start your journey. And I think all of us kind of need that. Yeah, that's a big answer, but I hope it's helpful. Thank you.
And then we have one more.
Hi, is this work? Oh, yeah. Hi, so I recently, just yesterday, went to a Tibetan traditional medicine doctor, and for me, I've been back and forth with traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine when it comes to my mental health, because it's been a long time, just chronic depression and anxiety, and I'm right now at this point willing to take the leap and kind of transitioning off my SSRIs to trying to do a more traditional approach and changing my diet, but at the same time really worried and afraid because depression really sucks and anxiety is really, really hard. And so I'm curious about your thoughts on traditional medicine practices when it comes to treating anxiety, chronic depression, and mental health.
Yeah. Thank you for starting this journey. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. And also I was wondering later on, could I get some resources from you too, like what you're talking about with TCM?
Yeah, totally. I write about it in the book as well.
Oh,
but
awesome.
yeah, I write about TCM as well. And also I had an acupuncture column for 3 years that I can send to you. I don't know your life experience, so I can't broadly say this. But I do think that indigenous medicines, which TCM is, it's a very old and ancient form of medicine, and is the key. Because we were having anxiety and depression back in the day too, but and there was an awareness of sort of, yeah, diet is a big one. People don't really think about that, but diet, especially in America, because of the dangerous food options that we have so much. I live in Los Angeles now, and part of the reason is because I was not well in New York. I didn't have access to healthy food here, and I was chronically ill, and I was chronically sick. So I think that all of these things, it's not just one thing, right? And that's also, for me, and I understand that it's a privilege to dedicate to multiple, methodologies. Like, I practice Ayurveda, and I get acupuncture regularly. I do trauma therapy, I do physical therapy, I do all of these things as a way to keep my body healthy and also so I'm functional. And I wrote this book because I think everyone should have access to that for free. Like, none of us should be paying for TCM, and especially if you need it, especially if you're a person who needs it. So in my life, it's been really rewarding, and it's a long journey. I've been using acupuncture as a tool for 8 years, so it's been a long process for me. And there's going to be times where you're going to feel like nothing is happening, and to stay with that feeling and to sort of like be curious and inquire into your own self. I think that everything, including depression and anxiety, are roadmaps back to yourself. And we're in such denial and in a fog of our own, experience that we can't see outside of that sometimes. And if you, start using these methodologies with a level of curiosity, I think it'll change that relationship, because it's not just about the one size fits all, you're well now. It's understanding that healing, especially from, in this world, is a dedicated practice. So it's going to take your whole life, maybe, and that's okay. And finding that ebb and flow and being okay with that up and down, I think will be incredibly liberating. I hope so. I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Thanks, y'all, for listening. If you would like to get a copy of the book, which I suggest you get a copy of the book, Fariha will be down on the first floor signing copies, and an opportunity to just engage a little bit more. So hope to see y'all there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you to Fariha and Sinikiwe for this generative, moving conversation, and thank you all for being here. Like they mentioned, please join us downstairs in the gift shop to either buy a copy of the book or also get it signed. It is by the main entrance on the first floor. And yeah, hope to see you next first Saturday. Thank you, everyone.